All right, so again, you had either the option of you have to do an actions, right? Whatever you, the watermark, and then you'll just submit that. You could just submit the image. And then here, besides that, you either have to do the website, which was above, or the 3D graphic. Okay. Out of the two, the website might seem more difficult. This one's definitely a lot more difficult, and there's more steps and stuff. Okay. So for some of you, maybe this might be interesting. For some of you, not so much. Okay. 3D graphics, unlike most 2D graphic workflows, is just, it's usually a conglomerate of a lot of different things, and you usually have to go from this program to that program to all these other things. I'm going to try and streamline it as much as possible and use mostly just Photoshop for this, but I did want to show you one program in order to create stuff. Okay, so we're going to make basically this little like fish thing. So there are a lot of programs that allow you to like sculpt and sort of and that sort of stuff right into the thing here, but I thought this one would be nice because you don't have to install it, so this will work on any piece of, or any computer that you're using. It's really easy. I'm actually just going to click on this link here to open it up in just it, but you can also sculpt directly into the browser here. I'm just going to go ahead and open it up in here. All right, so this is basically just a freebie. Just go on my website. It's, you know, just go down, you'll see it. This is basically just a freebie digital sculpting app. Okay, so this is not ZBrush, or I'm sorry, this is not Photoshop specific. This is just a generic sculpting app that's built into a browser. But it's neat and it's easy to work with, so that's why I'm gonna use it now, and you can use it too. So we're just gonna model something out real quick here. I'm just gonna make a fish, and then we're gonna basically put fish on like a plaque, you know, like the whatever that's called. But anyway, so that's what we're doing here. All right. So I'm not gonna go through and explain like all the settings. I'm just gonna try and do this kind of quickly just so you can see it. So underneath rendering, you can see we have these different options. Leave it on matte cap. If we put curvature on, when I go to sculpt, you'll see that basically it will, if I lower it, it'll almost kind of like darken the edges. So whether that's pleasing to you or not. And then if you do this filmic tone mapping, it'll also make it look a little bit easier. I'll put about halfway here, we'll say, and then I'll turn that on. All right, I'm just gonna Control Z to undo that sculpt. Let's see, they got different kinds of stuff here. None of this really matters because it's not going to show up in your, we'll just do clay. It's not going to show up in your actual Photoshop thing, but just be aware that you can adjust some of these settings. And if you need to turn the wireframe on and off, you can see it here, okay? It's also W. They'll put the hotkeys inside of parentheses next to it. Okay, now, topology. So there's topology, and then there's the sculpting and painting, and that's it. Okay, so the rendering, for the most part, that's really all you need to know. All right. The other two things are topology and sculpting. So topology, basically in 3D modeling, refers to the surface characteristics of a polygonal model, and what that basically means is the wireframe that you see here. Okay. So how is the grid flow that forms the model? Okay. So when I go to sculpt on this, right? Keep going. You see how the model is basically made up of these components, which we're not going to get into it, but basically you can see it's made up of this grid. Now the topology will allow this to look good or not look good. So for the sphere, these ones work pretty good, but you see how it's getting expanded and torn, and then you start to get what we call faceting, where you can see the faces of the polygons. Okay, so that's something obviously we don't really want. So you can subdivide the model, which will basically, what that'll do is that it will take what we have here, all these little squares, all right, what we call quads in 3D modeling. It will take those and cut those in half. The problem is as you subdivide, it will alleviate some of this stuff. So you'll see when I subdivide, see how it cut in half those, but it makes it denser and denser. And in order to get these really outside parts, I have to get the model really, really dense. So that really doesn't work that well. You can also slide this way, so I can go up levels and down levels, right? So you can see at a really low level what that looks like. This isn't really going to work well for what we're trying to do because I'm trying to model from scratch instead of like sculpting onto something I've already modeled. We're sculpting. So what we're going to do instead of this multi-resolution one, we're going to go down, click and drag? Okay. We're going to go down here, and I want to do down here this dynamic topology. So I'm going to hit remesh, and you're going to see it's going to remesh the model, hopefully. crash. Please don't crash. Maybe. Maybe it's going to do it. Oh, it's, there it goes. It's going to re-topologize it. What you're going to see, it has now what we call tries, okay? So now they're not quads, they're not squares, they're tries, which is fine. It's not really great, but it'll work for what we're doing, okay? I'm going to take the resolution down, because see how dense that is? It's way more dense than we need. So I'm going to take that down again. And you can see we have two options. We have voxel netting for quads and manifold tries. I'm just going to keep it on tries, just because it'll be a little bit easier. And I'm just going to remesh again, and we'll say that that's okay. Because we're going to eventually take this model and bring it right into Photoshop, but one of the problems is the denser the geometry, it's like a picture, right? A really, really big picture makes your computer slow down. A lot of geometry will make the computer slow down, and a lot of geometry makes the computer slow down, but like not even a lot of geometry makes Photoshop really slow down, because it's not really entirely built for that. You can literally do millions of polygons in a 3D app, but inside of Photoshop you can do, you know, thousands. So not a lot, okay? So we want to keep it low. So we're going to make sure that that's low, so we'll do like a resolution around 50, okay? And then the other thing I want to do is, you see where it says act, let me move this over. Come on. Come on. There we go. I think I got it. Okay. Now, right now, we're going to run the same problem I did before, where if I sculpt, okay, all it's going to do, and it's really, really slow. Let me try closing this window out, because then I only have one running. It's running really super slow. What it's going to do is it's just going to sculpt out. But you can see the resolution is not high enough. There's not enough polys there to support it. So what I can do instead is over here, I can activate no quads. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to automatically subdivide. Don't worry about these settings. You don't really need to worry about it. It's going to automatically subdivide the model as I sculpt. Now watch when I sculpt. It's going to create geometry that I need as I'm sculpting. So I can keep going and see how it's actually creating the geometry. That's what I want to happen. And I actually want this to be a bit lower. So I guess I do care about the numbers, because that was a little bit too high. Let's go a little bit lower still. Let's say around 20. 20 is probably good. Okay? And that way I can make more limbs and stuff. It'll create the geometry as I'm going. I think that's all I really need to worry about as far as topology is concerned. So I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to minimize rendering. And now I'm going to open up sculpting. Okay? So in the sculpting, basically this is where you're going to be doing most of your stuff here. Okay? So we have the different tools. So there's brush, inflate, twist. You can probably tell what they are by reading them. Okay? For the most part, you're really just going to need brush, and you're probably going to need drag or move, and that'll be about it. Okay? So brush just is what we've been doing. Basically, it's addition. So when you click and drag on it, it'll brush. If I hold, is it Alt? Yeah, Alt and click and drag and click with the mouse, it'll go in. So it'll go in or out. That's that. If you hold Shift, that is smooth, which will try to smooth the surface. Okay. And then if I hold Control, that will create what we call mask. And what that does is that, see how this is like gray? Now when I go to sculpt, if I sculpt over this whole thing, it will not affect the masked area. So that's kind of useful. So right here, you can also do masking by clicking on this. You see how it says Shift and Control? That's what that is. So is there a clear button? I don't see the clear button for it. So probably Alt and Control is probably how you erase it. It doesn't, oops. How much? Okay. Alt and Control. That didn't work. Control and Shift. I don't know how to get rid of the mask. Let's see. Let's go to masking. Maybe just Alt while we're on mask. Okay. If you go on mask and just hold Alt and basically Alt is the opposite of whatever it is that the tool is. So you're going to have to hit Alt and click. I was hoping that they would have a clear, oh, right here, clear. There it is. Just click on that button and it'll clear it out. You can also blur it and sharpen your masking. Or you can just hold Control while you do it. Okay. So that's the brushes, blah, 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 blah. And you can see they have settings for them up here. Now I can quickly change the size of the brush and the intensity of the brush. But I can also just hold X. So if I hold X and click and drag, it'll make it, I don't even need to click. Just hold X and drag. It'll make the brush bigger, or I can make it smaller. You can see, right? And then for intensity, it's just C. So basically, if I go, you can see the sliders moving here. Okay. So if I go really high, it's going to do a whole lot, although it's not as obvious here. And if I go really low, it's going to barely do anything. Can't even hardly see it. Okay, so that should make sense to you, hopefully. And we have symmetry on, which just means what we do on one side will happen on the other. You see the little red dot over there as I'm brushing. Okay. Now, to actually navigate the space is you just click and drag anywhere that's not on the model. That will rotate. If I hold middle mouse button and click, so middle mouse button would be the little wheelie ball, this thing, right, on your mouse, or, you know, whatever you have on it. So click, and then to zoom in and out, you just scroll with your wheel, okay? You can also alt right mouse button to pan. And then, is there any other way to zoom? Looks like that's it. Yeah, so alt and click. Okay, so zooming in seems to only work with the scroll wheel. So if you have a crappy mouse with a crappy scroll wheel, that's stinks to be you. Sorry. Okay. So I played around with this a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and do a new scene. So just clear scene. I'm just going to clear it, and then I'm just going to do scene, and we'll just add a sphere. And we'll start with a fresh sphere here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make a fish. Let me make sure all my settings are still set up. Let me see. So make sure that activate, no quads, and so underneath topology, if you just did what I did, open it up, and then activated no quads is turned on. And that we have 20 for the subdivision. That should probably be fine. Okay, and then we're back on this. Okay, so I want to make a fish. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to generally make the fish shape. So I'm going to say this is the front, and these are the sides. So I need to pull this forward. So I'm going to rotate to the side here. Okay, and I'm going to pull out a little bit, and then I'm going to switch my brush to move. Okay, and I'm going to hold X and just drag to the right. And I'm just going to kind of pull this way to make it a fish shape. I'm going to hold X and make this a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to pull the back end this way, like so. And now I have this shape that looks acceptable. Okay, and then I'm just going to go to the top view. Again, I'm going to hold X and click and drag, and he looks a little bit chunky. I'm just going to click and squeeze. All right, so now we've got this. It looks sort of fish shaped. And I'm going to switch from move to brush. And I'm just going to hold shift and just brush over this and smooth it out. Okay, so it's very often what you want to do is just smooth out the model. Okay, so I'm looking at this and it's getting a little bit slow. And you see how dense it is? It feels really dense. So I'm going to fix that real quick. I'm going to go to topology. And then I'm going to go to right here where it says dynamic topology, and it says voxel remesh manifold tries. I'm going to hit remesh, and you're going to see it's going to lower the geometry here. Because I have it at 54. Make sure it's lower. See how this less? Now it'll be, I don't know if you can tell, but now it's much more responsive. Actually, it's not that much better, but it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and smooth this out. I'll hit W again to turn the wireframe off. Just going to smooth out the side of the model here. Smooth out. Smooth out. Okay. And now I'm going to minimize my topology back on the brush. And I'm just going to go ahead and I just want to brush the top fin here. So I'm going to hold X and make the brush smaller. We'll say it like that. And then I'm going to hold C and make it stronger. We want it really strong. So I went to like 85. And I'm just going to brush down the center here. Right, like so, until I get something that looks like that. I'm just going to draw kind of nublets for the various things here. Actually, that looks wrong. I'm going to undo that. I think usually the fins are a little bit lower, so I'm going to put fin ray around here. I'm just going to click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, just so until I get to a part where it's sticking out. And he's going to need a back fin. Right, so we did the dorsal, and the flipper part. Just gonna go ahead. I'm just clicking and dragging. Let me hit W to see how that. Yep, okay, it's generating geometry. Good. And all right, so now I'm just gonna work on those fins, and then I'll work on the face last. So the fin here, I'm just gonna go ahead and instead of move, I'm gonna use drag. And I'll hit W just because I want to see the geometry. Okay. And I'm just trying to make this thing look like a fin. That's a really nice looking, this is a nice looking fish, as you can tell. It's not my preferred program. Okay. But feel free to play around with, I'm just going to hold shift now and smooth. And we'll just smooth this out a little bit. There we go. Okay. So we'll call that a dorsal fin. Alright, and then we're just going to take this, and I'm just going to pull this out. And I'm just going to hold shift and smooth, because it's definitely getting pinched. See, like, when I go underneath here, see how it's like, oops, I was still holding drag. I'm just going to hold shift on that area and brush over it, and you'll see it, it'll smooth out the weird imperfections there. I'm just going to hold shift and just smooth all that out. And smooth, smooth, smooth. Alright, and I'm just going to pull this out a little bit more. You know, shape it however you want. And I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to pull this up, and we'll pull this down. That looks pretty not great. Okay. And then I'm just going to kind of push this in, just to squish it so that the fin's a little bit thinner, because it feels a little thick, but it's not going to be perfect. We'll call that good enough. Okay. So we have sort of a fish shape. Try to do something simple, obviously, that doesn't have a ton of detail. That's acceptable. Let's go ahead and just get a little bit of a mouth. So I'm going to go to brush, and I'm going to go ahead and just click. I'm going to hit W to get the wireframe up, because that's not super helpful. And I'm just going to kind of draw a little bit of a mouth. And I'm just going to hold shift on the top part to smooth out the top. That's good. Now I want to cut in for the eye, so I'm going to hold Alt as I draw, and that will go inwards. You see? And then I'm going to draw a brow. Kind of goes like this. And we'll do a little bit of a cheekbone, and I'm just going to hold shift and smooth these out. Alright, now inside of this, I'm just going to draw, I'm still using the brush, I'm just not holding Alt this time. I'm going to kind of come back out for an eyeball. Alright, and you can see it's kind of an ugly fish. You get the idea. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is just kind of further do some of these details here. Okay, and we're just going to add a little bit to this fin here. Alright, and then maybe just kind of draw a little bit around the edge here, and then just hold shift. And let's just kind of do the same thing here. Alright, that's acceptable. Now, another thing you can do here, just to add a little bit of detail, is that there's this nice crease tool. So I'm using the crease tool. And this one I can use to basically push creases. So I want to make his mouth a little bit better. So I'm going to hold X and make it just a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to draw a line right where I put his lip. Around. Now I am using my mouse. I'm not using my Cintiq, so no cheating. So you can see I'm not doing anything that you couldn't do. And I'm just going to go like this and maybe put, it's going to make him kind of an angry one, I guess. And then I'm just going to kind of draw a line for kind of that part. And then we'll just, right, and then from this, I'm just going to go ahead and draw a crease for where his gills would be. So we'll put like one here and one here. It's kind of a nondescript fish. And then I'm going to put a crease around his fin there, just to make it a little more obvious, and maybe draw some creases for like striations of his fin. That looks terrible. You get the idea. And you kind of do the same thing here. I'm just going to draw these creases. Imagine I did a good job. I swear I used to do this as a job. Okay. Woo! Alright. This isn't my favorite program. There's a lot of other programs, and if this is something you're interested in, I could totally suggest some that are even free that are better than this. But for our intents and purposes, I'm just trying to get you a rough idea. I don't want to spend all day on it. But anyway, so you see, we've got this fish, right? He looks acceptable. Anyway, so I got this fish dude. Before I export him out, I just want to look at what his topology is. I'm going to hit W for his wireframe. We're just going to see. This honestly is not bad. This is probably okay. I'm going to export out 2 of them just to make sure that it runs okay inside of Photoshop, particular for myself because my Photoshop is not good. So I'm going to export this out, and we're going to export out what we call an OBJ. It's a generic model format, and it's kind of neat. If you're on a Mac, you can actually, you know how like if you click on a PSD or any image in the Explorer, what do they call it, the Finder window, you can actually see a preview of it. You can actually preview if you like click on a OBJ. You can actually preview OBJs, which is nice. They started doing something similar in PCs, but it's not the same and it's not as cool. Anyway, so I got this. I'm just gonna go ahead and export this out. So we have export all. Let me see. Save diffuse roughness. We're not doing any texturing in here. We're gonna do that inside of whatchamacallit. So OBJ color. Let me see. Save OBJ. Right. So we're gonna do save OBJ, and it's gonna be called my mesh, and I want it to save. And voila, you can see it saved it right to my downloads. But besides this one's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and go to topology. And you can do this too if you find that your mesh is too dense. Like this is kind of honestly on the cusp. This might be a little bit too dense. But if yours is even denser, you're definitely going to want to do this. So I'm going to go down to topology here. And remember how we did that thing to lower the number? Where are you? This remesh. I'm going to click on this again. The problem is when we go to remesh it, we're going to lose, you can see I lose my detail. So let's see if I can do a better job here. So activate no quads, subdivision. Maybe I can, let's try that. Ugh. Let's take this down. Let's up the subdivision. I'm hoping if I do, man, it's not really. Let's try, oh, you know why? Because I was doing it on this one. I'm sorry. I meant to do it on this. I was clicking the wrong thing. So let's try the resolution. Let's not relax the topology. And let's try remeshing if we do 200. That's actually probably higher than what we started with. I don't know why I upped that. That was bad. Yeah, that's too high. So I'm going to go lower. Let's try 62. That's too low. Trying to find a happy medium where it lowers the overall. Because right now, if we look at our vertexes, we have 35,000 right here and 70,000 faces. So the faces are the areas in between, and vertexes are the points. The lines are called edges. So what did that look like? Let me see. I didn't even notice. Yeah, see, it doesn't look very good. What if I hit relax? What does that look like? Oh, relax actually looks a little bit better. See, that relaxed it, but if you look, I'm not getting that much of a gain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do just a lower version as well. So that's what, 7,500? I feel like that would be low enough. Let me just smooth out. I'm just going to smooth out a couple of these spots here that are clunky, and I'm going to export out this one as well. So we're going to do File, Save OBJ, and I don't want to call this one. Okay, good, yeah. So I'm just going to save that one too. So basically I have saved your mesh, which is the higher res one, and then the your mesh, which was the lower geometry one. Okay, so we basically had 2 sculpts that we played around with. You can play around with this program more if you want. There's all sorts of fun things you can do with it. But I just want to do something that you don't have to install any software or anything like this. You can do it right in the browser. It'd be real easy. And this way you have something you can bring in. One thing that, like, if you were into 3D, we do occasionally use Photoshop. We won't use it quite the way we're doing it. But so you would have a way of modeling a model and bringing it in. But this is kind of the quickest, easiest, dirtiest way to kind of get a model that we could bring in there and then do stuff with it in Photoshop. Okay, so model whatever you want for this. I'm doing a fish. You could do a different kind of fish. I was going to do the 3-eyed fish, but then I didn't. Whatever you want, you know. Sky's the limit. Just make something 3D. All right, so I'm going to end this video, and then the next one we'll bring it in, and we'll start like doing stuff with it inside of Photoshop.